Alright, let's be real for a second. Every year it's the same thing. You get a pile of documents, you open a few PDFs, you stare at forms that feel like they're written in another language, and somehow, by the end of it, like me, you're mad at the IRS. It's basically a national tradition at this point, and a collective pain that happens every April. And we've all kind of just accepted this story, and that this is just how it works. That the tax system is some kind of impossible monster, that it's complicated by nature, that the IRS doesn't care, that paying hundreds of dollars and losing a weekend of your life is just part of being an adult. But what if that isn't actually true? What if the reason your taxes feel so complicated and expensive isn't really the government's fault at all? What if the real problem has been hiding in plain sight this whole time, sitting right there on your computer with a friendly logo claiming to be free? What if the system was deliberately designed this way by one company who has spent decades and millions of dollars making sure that you never stop paying them year after year after year? Because that's what this is really about. This is the story of how TurboTax built an empire making sure you can never easily file your taxes for free. Although, before we get on to that, if you appreciate my videos or learn anything from them, it would mean the world to me if you could hit that like and subscribe. I barely have any subs, and it would really help me create more interesting videos. Back to the video. Alright, to understand how we ended up in our current tax situation, you have to zoom out for a second. The American tax system, in all its frustrating, confusing glory, is not an accident. It's a product, and the company that sells that product better than anyone else is Intuit, the parent company of TurboTax. Intuit didn't just stumble into this position, they were founded back in the 1980s. They built QuickBooks, they built TurboTax, and over time they quietly positioned themselves right in the middle of how small businesses, freelancers, and everyday people interact with money and taxes. Today, Intuit is massive. A 2025 consumer survey showed they controlled about 60% of the US tax software market. That means that the majority of Americans who use software to file their taxes are using a product owned by one company. They handle tax returns for roughly 40 million people every single year. That's tens of millions of households and billions of dollars flowing through one system. For a lot of people, TurboTax isn't just a software. It's what they think the tax system is. But they didn't get this powerful just by building a good product. They got here through a 20-year campaign that combined buying up competitors, aggressive lobbying in Washington, and some very intentional, very deceptive marketing that helped destroy the idea of a free, simple tax filing system for everyone. Back when the internet was just getting started, there was a real belief that technology could make things easier, that filing your taxes could eventually be as simple as checking your email. This simple future was promised by politicians and entrepreneurs alike, and then it was taken away. To really get it, you have to rewind to the late 1990s and early 2000s. The internet was changing everything: banking, communication, commerce, and the US government saw a huge opportunity sitting right in front of them. The idea was simple, almost obvious. What if filing your taxes wasn't a chore? In a lot of other developed countries, this is already how it works. Their tax agencies get income information directly from employers and banks. They do the math themselves, and they send taxpayers a pre-filed return. If everything looks right, you do nothing. If something needs fixing, you fix it. That's it. It's fast, it's simple, and most importantly, it's free. This idea is called return-free filing, and had supporters in the US government for years. Ronald Reagan even talked about a version of it in 1985. By the early 2000s, it felt inevitable. The George W. Bush administration proposed something called the Easy Tax Filing Initiative. The goal was to build a free, automated public tax filing system. The IRS was very close to building its own software that let most Americans file directly with them online for free. Imagine how different that would feel. Early March, you get an email from the IRS. It says, "We prepared your return, your refund is $1,200, if this looks right, click here." And you're done. No software to buy, no upgrades, no upsells, no weekend loss to stress, and second-guessing deductions. For millions of people with simple taxes, that would have been the end of it. The government estimated this could save people 13 hours and hundreds of dollars every single year. It was common sense, and that's exactly why it was dangerous. Because a free, simple government system would be a direct threat to the tax prep industry. And the king of that industry was Intuit. They saw that future clearly, and they decided to kill it. Intuit bought TurboTax back in 1993, and by early 2000s, TurboTax wasn't a product, it was the foundation of their business. So when the government started talking seriously about free filing, Intuit didn't see a public service, they saw an existential threat. A government that helps people do their taxes for free is a government that puts tax prep companies out of business. And Intuit wasn't about to let that happen. So they did what big companies do best. They lobbied. Hard. They sent lobbyists to Washington, they flooded Capitol Hill, they framed the whole thing as government overreach. They framed it as the IRS trying to compete with private businesses, an abuse of power. And it worked. In 2002, the Bush administration backed off. The IRS dropped its plan. In its place came something that sounded reasonable on paper, but turned out to be a disaster in reality. It was called the Free File Alliance. The deal was simple. private tax software companies led by Intuit and H&R Block would offer free versions of their software to lower-income taxpayers. In exchange, the IRS had to promise not to build its own free filing system. That one clause is everything. They neutralized their biggest competitor, the US government. They took a public service and turned it into a controlled funnel, and they got to call themselves the good guys while doing it. Here's where it gets ugly. On paper, the Free File Alliance meant about 70% of Americans were eligible for free filing. In reality, less than 3% actually did. That wasn't an accident. First, they blurred the meaning of the word free. TurboTax launched massive ad campaigns for its commercial free edition. You've seen them, free, free, free. But that version was not the IRS Free File program. It only worked if your taxes were extremely simple. The moment you had freelance income, student loan interest, a side hustle, or anything slightly more complicated, you'd get deep into the process and suddenly be told you had to upgrade. An experience I'm sure many of you watching this have experienced. And once your hour's in, most people just pay. Meanwhile, the actual IRS Free File version was almost impossible to find. Investigations later showed that Intuit added a no-index, no-follow tag to its Free File webpage. That line of code told Google and Bing not to show the page in search results. They weren't just failing to promote it, they were actively hiding it. So if you search Free File IRS, you didn't get the program you were entitled to. You got routed straight into the paid funnel. The result was predictable. A 2019 Treasury Inspector General report found that 14 million eligible taxpayers were tricked into paying for software they should have gotten for free. Millions of people, many with low income, paying for something the government had already promised them. This went on for years. Eventually it got so blatant that the government stepped in. In 2022, the FTC sued Intuit over its bait-and-switch advertising. The FTC banned Intuit from advertising anything as free unless it was free for everyone. Intuit also agreed a $141 million settlement with all 50 states for misleading 4.4 million customers. But by then, the damage was done. An entire generation had been trained to believe that paying to file taxes is normal. And from Intuit's perspective, it worked. TurboTax became a money-printing machine. At its peak in 2021, TurboTax controlled 73% of the market. Even in 2025, it still sits around 60%. That dominance translates into massive profits, and a big chunk of those profits goes right back into lobbying. After the last 2 decades, Intuit has spent tens of millions of dollars fighting any attempt to create a government-run free filing system. When the IRS started working on Direct File, lobbying ramped up again. In 2023, Intuit spent $3.8 million on lobbying. In 2024, another $3.7 million. Public Citizen later found that lawmakers who pushed to kill Direct File have received millions in campaign contributions from Intuit, H&R Block, and their lobbyists. They used the profits from a broken system to pay politicians to keep it broken. That was their playbook. And the cost isn't just money. It's the 13 hours people waste every year. It's the stress, it's the anxiety, it's the feeling that the whole thing is rigged. Because for 20 years it was. After 2 decades, cracks finally started to show. Intuit and H&R Block quietly left the Free File Alliance, lawsuits, bad press, too much scrutiny. And once they left, the agreement that blocked the IRS from building its own system died with it. And the IRS moved fast. They built Direct File. In 2024 and 2025, the IRS launched a pilot program that let people with simple returns file directly with the agency online and for free. Over 140,000 people used it, and about 90% rated their experience as excellent or above average. For the first time in a long time, people saw what taxes could actually feel like. And then, in late 2025, it stalled again. A new law was passed. Buried inside it was a provision that effectively suspended Direct File. The IRS later confirmed it wouldn't be available for the 2026 filing season. It was the same pressure, the same playbook. This story isn't really about taxes. It's about what happens when corporate power captures public policy. For 20 years, Intuit told us a story that taxes are too hard, that the government can't handle it, that we need them to guide us. But the maze was the product. The complexity was intentional. They didn't just sell tax software, they sold the problem their software claimed to solve. And whether we keep paying that toll or finally take it back is still being decided. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like and subscribe, and follow me on LinkedIn if you're interested in my business pursuits.